11 years since February 11, 2011 setback, Yemen still pays the toll of chaos. The United Nations says that the ongoing conflict in Yemen causes severe casualties. Government forces continue to liberate key areas in Hajjah. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Shaza Abdelbey. The spokesperson of the State Department, Ned Price, said that the Houthis have checked a dangerous pattern of increasingly aggressive actions against Yemenis and Yemen's neighbors and the international community. He added that the United States, along with the international community, continues to urge de-escalation of the conflict. He said all parties should work together and support the new, more comprehensive UN-led peace process. Further, he commended the terrorist attacks by the Houthi rebels that struck the airport in Abha in Saudi Arabia. It's been 8 years since Yemen's youth revolution, or rather the setback that pushed Yemen into a dark drive. Since then, the country received nothing but civil war, destruction of institutions, and complete state of chaos. This report has more details.
11 years have passed, and the people of Yemen received nothing from the high priest of sedition except destruction and desolation. It has been 11 years since the outbreak of the youth revolution in Yemen, or rather the setback driven by the winds of the Arab Spring uprising coming from Tunisia via Egypt. At the beginning, for most people, those uprisings seemed spontaneous and popular, but they turned out to be an excuse for the execution of a malicious and carefully calculated plan to overthrow Arab regimes, destroy their countries and displace their populations. Little did they know that whatever developed that slogan meant it literally and nothing less. The only thing that Yemen has seen so far is the literal application of overthrow of the regime without leading to any improvement. This meant the destruction of the institutions of the state, of the army and of the police, plus ensuing political, economic and social catastrophes. Leaders of the movement blamed then former President Ali Abdullah Saleh for that situation. Yet, it was Ali Abdullah Saleh who handed them power peacefully under the terms of the Gulf Initiative and gave the best history lesson in democratic and peaceful handover of power, not only in Yemen but in the entire region. The February calamity was a heaven-sent opportunity for those aspiring to turn back the wheels of history and bring back the authority of the imamate priesthood after a decade of patiently waiting for the right time to pounce on power. The vengeful spirit was clearly illustrated when Houthi militia entered Sana'a as partners of the Muslim Brotherhood on that disastrous February the 11th. The common people have lost their country, while those seditious vampires sit in their ivory towers and suck up the people's wealth. Yemenis have paid a heavy tribute of blood and livelihood. Tens of thousands of people were killed, and double that number have been injured and ended up with permanent disabilities. Hundreds of thousands more have been displaced to the four corners of the world. So, what are they celebrating? Today, the leaders of that malicious movement are celebrating the anniversary of their setback despite the destruction, devastation and corruption they brought about. Had their goals been patriotic and honorable, they wouldn't have dared celebrate while the country was falling down and the drain a bit further every hour of every day.
UN panel of experts on Yemen publishes a final report. The final report of the UN panel of experts on Yemen was published on 26 January 2022. The report recommends that the Security Council call on parties with the Yemeni conflict to undertake the following measures and recommends that the UN Security Council to impose sanctions if the parties do not respect the Riyadh and Stockholm agreements. The report also called Houthi militia not to use educational, religious, and public institutions to incite hatred or violence, and not to use schools, summer camps, and mosques to recruit children. The report concluded by stressing the need to take measures to prevent the further fragmentation of the Yemeni economy. The Houthis' list of violations against Yemen's children continue to grow. According to the UN panel of experts on Yemen, the Houthi host summer camps to radicalize young people. This report has more details.
Thousands of minors have been recruited by the Houthis since the beginning of their military expansion in late 2014, according to human rights organizations, with hundreds killed in conflict last year. The UN panel of experts on Yemen reported that the Iran-backed Houthis staged large summer camps in schools and mosques, where Yemeni youths were radicalized, given weapons training, and then dispatched to the battlefields to fight Yemeni government forces. During the annual summer camp, children received military training, including evading rockets, laying mines, and digging tunnels. The experts have documented instances in which Houthis sexually abused women who refused to attend their camps. In addition, the rebels denied other individuals humanitarian aid for refusing to fight. According to experts, many Yemenis attend recruiting events out of fear of being punished by the Houthis or losing financial rewards. Yemeni military experts and officials believe that the Houthis have doubled their recruitment of children through summer camps and courses to increase their manpower, which has been depleted by attrition tactics used by government troops in Ma'rib. According to military reports, child soldiers have been murdered on battlefronts outside the city of Ma'rib, as the Houthis attempt to capture control of the city. Sources have stated that 1,410 children aged 10 to 15 who had been recruited by the militia had been murdered in fighting in 2020. They've also reported that Houthis had established 52 military outposts for indoctrinating and training youths, and that over 40,000 children have been recruited in the war over the last 7 years. The Houthis' violations against children are vile. The Houthis are attempting to build a generation of extremists who constitute a threat to Yemen, the region, and the world, with no regard for the children's well-being and what harm may befall them.
The United Nations said that the conflict in Yemen continues to take a huge toll on civilians. The United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs confirmed that 21 civilians were killed and injured a day in January 2022. As for the past year, 2021, OCHA added that 2,508 civilians were killed and injured. The coalition announced the implementation of a series of airstrikes targeting the Houthi militia sites in the governorates of Sa'da and Hajjah during the past hours. It said in its daily report, according to the Saudi press agency, that it targeted the Houthi militia in Sa'da and Hajjah with about 16 operations during the past 24 hours. The coalition stated that the targeting operations resulted in the destruction of 13 military vehicles and human losses among the militia. An armed group affiliated with the terrorist Houthi militia burned the house of a family after beating them in Taiz, southwest of Yemen. The head of the National Union for Development of the Poorest said that the Yemeni people affiliated with the Houthi militia attacked the black citizen in reference to the marginalized segment Mohammed Safi and all his family members and burned his house in Rahba. Al-Huzaifi explained that the militia committed its crime for refusing to fight in the ranks of the group, which practices all forms of intimidation against all dark-skinned people who refuse to fight in its ranks. The government forces said they continue to clear the city of Haradh in Hajjah from the Houthi rebels. The government forces warned those recruited by the rebels against being attracted into fighting in Haradh. Further, about 30 Houthi militants were killed in airstrikes that were carried out by the coalition jet fighters near a village in Haradh. British ambassador in Yemen said that the journalists in Yemen are often targeted for trying to do their job. He added that the conflict has led to an increase in violation. The British ambassador said that journalists deserve the right to work freely and express their opinion without paying such a price. He called on all parties to respect journalists. Districts south of Ma'rib are under a stifling siege, with more than 60,000 people cut off from food and medical supplies. This report has more details.
At the heel of the violent battles waged in the districts of southern Ma'rib, in which the Houthi militia suffered heavy losses, came a militia-imposed siege on the districts of Rahba, Mahiriya, Al-Juba, and Jabal Murad. The people living in these areas struggled to survive after the roads leading to the city of Ma'rib were cut off. More than 60,000 people labor under severe food and drug shortages due to the lack of health care under the Houthi militia siege. The effects the siege had were also reflected in education, with more than 3,400 students dropping out of schools.
The districts south of Ma'rib are under siege, and most of our food and medicine stock is nearly depleted. Residents have to pass through 5 districts before reaching Ma'rib, whereas the journey used to take us 2 hours. The road to Ma'rib is cut off for the districts of Rabha, Mahliya, Al-Juba, and Jabal Murad, and we have no way of restocking our diminished supplies. A woman in Al-Juba needed to be transported to a dialysis clinic in Harib, but the journey proved to be too difficult, and she passed away on the way. This injustice enrages us all, and we call upon all relevant parties to lift the imposed siege.
The residents of the southern districts are living off of the remnants of their food supplies. Local organizations have warned that people are at a real risk of famine, and that without urgent emergency intervention, the situation can only devolve.
We are faced with serious humanitarian crisis. We call upon human rights activists and journalists to stand with our cause and build humanitarian passages to allow aid like food, medicine, and fuel derivatives to reach our people. We call upon international organizations to bring an end to these injustices.
Human rights reports condemned the unjust siege imposed on the southern districts of Ma'rib Governorate by the Houthi militia and stressed that the Iranian-backed group's actions are in violation of international law.
Coming next, Nasr Hospital in Al-Dala continues to provide medical services despite lack of government support.
اضطرينا ان نغادر من ذي وزحنا.
الله يستنقذكم يا محويتني الله يستنقذ.
Welcome back. Al-Nasr Hospital in Al-Dala continues to provide medical services despite lacking severe equipment. This report has more details.
Despite the lack of government support and international organizations working in the health field, Al-Nasr Hospital continues to provide its medical services to citizens from various districts of Al-Dala, in addition to the people wounded on the fronts. Following the departure of Doctors Without Borders in recent years, the central hospital in Al-Dala has been suffering and facing many difficulties, as many of its departments are still in need of devices, equipment and medicines.
The hospital provides a lot of services to patients and wounded people from war, with the available equipments and labor they have. We've excellent medical calibers with the highest grades in education, with a lot of qualifications and experience. The hospital suffers from lack of services, support and shortage in medical equipment and medicines. The government support is almost zero, and there isn't any support from organizations working in health field too.
The emergency department at Al-Nasr Hospital works throughout the day to receive emergency cases, carry out first aid and surgeries, and transfer them to sleeping section for children, women and men, in addition to having a small recovery room and providing inspection services in clinics that is open during official working hours. The number of patients from inside and outside the governorate exceeds the hospital's capacity amid calls to save the hospital.
With 20 beds in the hospital, which are all occupied now, with some patients, but we don't have enough beds for them. There is a lack in medicines. Patients get medicines from abroad. There is a shortage in some tranquility medicines. Even the Panadol for pregnant women, and shortage in liquids and medical equipment too. We call on authorities and organizations to support this hospital, as it's the main hospital in Al-Dala. We hope that people who do charity works can come here to this hospital and see the deteriorating situation of it.
Al-Nasr Hospital in Al-Dala is facing great pressure due to the increasing number of patients and people wounded from war. Being the central hospital in the governorate requires providing the necessary support to the hospital by government agencies and international organizations to save the hospital, as it's a destination for large numbers of low-income people.
A storehouse run by Houthi rebels for selling oil and gas exploded in the capital Sana'a. Pictures showed an explosion that took place in the storehouse and fires that erupted as a consequence of the explosion. Sources in the capital Sana'a said that Houthi rebels carried out wild looting in medical institutions. The sources said that the rebels looted more than 70 medical centers in the past few days through removing large quantities of medicines from companies. Houthis stormed the headquarters of Ibda Software Banking Systems in the capital Sana'a and seized the company's servers. Banking sources stated that the Houthi militia detained the company's director as part of its repeated operations of kidnapping businessmen and raiding companies, banks, and shops in the areas under its control. The sources confirmed that the SOFT system and its remittance network are used by at least 95% of the money changers in Yemen, indicating that the Houthi militia seeks to monitor remittance with the aim of stealing them. The war in Yemen has overshadowed all aspects of life. Medical sector is one of those affected severely by the war. Thousands of people cannot have access to medical services. This report has more details.
Over 80% of Yemeni are facing deterioration in health services. Due to the ongoing conflict in Yemen, more than 80% of the population are lacking health services and facilities, which resulted in the death of newborns every 2 hours. The scene in Yemen today describes the health sector status, which has been suffering deterioration since the beginning of the war. The health sector is facing challenges in provision and aid, which resulted in the function of only 50% of health facilities. The conflict in Yemen made it difficult for more than 80% of the population to access healthcare services. Additionally, the deterioration of health facilities was the third direct cause of the rising death rates in Yemen. Lacking health services has also resulted in the increase of malnutrition, low immunization rates, and outbreaks of communicable diseases, according to a study published by the International Financial Institution. The World Bank has notified that malnutrition in Yemen causes the death of one mom and 6 newborns every 2 hours. Malnutrition has pushed Yemen to the highest levels of the world's nations under treatment requiring, accounting for 1.2 million pregnant women and 2.3 million children who need health aid. The external fund for the health sector has decreased, which has worsened the situation of healthcare in Yemen and caused a shortage of equipment, human resources, and supplies to hospitals. The future of the health sector in Yemen is still uncertain, and it is expected to remain the same until the improvement of external funds by implementing organizations around the world.
Here's a reminder of the main headlines. 11 years since February 11, 2011 setback, Yemen still pays the toll of chaos. The United Nations says that the ongoing conflict in Yemen causes severe casualties. Government forces continue to liberate key areas in Hajjah. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.